Well, it's time. We're about to introduce our speaker, Linda Samuels, and we got a really, really great crowd. I'm just going to kind of like move this around so you can see everybody, okay? Check it out. Oh, yes. All right, so just hang on, maybe get a glass of wine or a cup of tea, but wine is better. And we're going to get started in like 2 minutes, okay? Everybody needs a refill. Anybody need a refill? So we're so happy to have you here. So this is, I think, our 6th monthly speaker event, and we're so excited. And as you know, we have it on the 3rd Thursday of each month. So we have a whole host of speakers, and it's just we're building this wonderful sense of community. I love seeing your faces and just catching up. And we have Eric, who's going to be our speaker next month, and he is a sculptor, so he's unbelievable. And we've had past speakers here, so we're just so happy that you're here joining us. As you know, I am Denise Wenneker, and I am principal of DW Design and Decor, and we are a full-service interior design and build firm, and we do everything from whole houses to multi-room projects. One of our favorite ones that I'm hoping that you're going to be following us on social media. And if you're not, it's an Instagram and Facebook. It's at DW Design and Decor, because we post daily and we post all sorts of in-the-moment project updates. And one of the coolest ones that I'm working on is a house in Greenwood Lake. So we gutted it. It's been in the family since the 1970s. It's beautiful, and we do everything from the tiling to the floor plans to all the furniture, lighting, everything. And we have our great contractors and architects that we brought in to do these kind of projects. So much fun. So that's a favorite. So please kind of look at that. They should be coming back. It should be done in maybe May and June. Yeah. And on that note, I wanted to introduce you. We're so excited, Linda Samuels. And what was so fun is yesterday we did a little quickie run through just to make sure all the silly technology was working properly. And I got to know her a little bit more. And I found out that she has a background in fine art, was a painter, went into graphic design, and then called upon her 30 years ago, unbelievable organizational skills and so forth, got accreditations and everything. She'll tell you a little bit more about that. But you are just amazing. So you guys are going to realize how incredible she is, and you're going to have some great takeaways on how to organize, declutter, and get ready for this wonderful spring season. So on that note, welcome. How's everyone doing? Great. Feeling really organized? Thank you, Denise. Thanks for having me. And these are just such wonderful events that you put on each month. And a special thank you for wearing purple. She knows how much I like purple, so feeling the purple. Yeah, feeling the purple. So I guess we have maybe about 40 minutes, something like that. Half an hour. Clutter. Is clutter a familiar situation for anyone here? So we're going to be talking a little about clutter tonight, and there's so much to talk about, and I tried to hone it in. But what I wanted to do first, really important, was, is there anyone here, it may seem unrelated, but is there anyone here that loves fortune cookies? Loves fortune cookies? Or likes them or loves them? Okay. Yeah. I really like them. I like the cookie, but I really like the fortune. So instead of that, I have what I call organizing one-liners. No cookie, just the fortune. So I'm going to pass this around. Feel free to take one. They're all a little different. If you happen to take one that doesn't resonate with you, you can put it back and take another one. So I'm going to pass that.
I like it.
Don't hide them, but you can, feel free. I also have, at the end, I have a little giveaway. I have a couple gifts for you guys. And I have the cards. I'm going to pass these out. Pass these out. If you need pencils, pass them out. If you only want to just possibly get a gift, just put your name on the card. If you would like me to sign you up for a free monthly e-newsletter, which has organizing tips, life balance tips, then also give me your email. Don't feel obligated, but you have that choice. But if you put your name, then you're part of the drawing for that. So you can kind of do that as we get going. Sorry. So I love this quote. One person's mess is merely another person's filing system. And one of the things that I learned when I first started my business, and I'll get into my background in a minute, but I wanted to start with a couple stories. Very early on in my career, I got phone calls from two different people, potential clients. One person called me up and said, I have so much clutter in my house that I can't even move. Okay? The other person called me up and said, I have so much clutter in my house that I can't even think. Wow. Very different responses to clutter. So each of them described the clutter, but it's one thing to hear someone describe the clutter. It's another thing to actually see it. So I go to the first client, and when I got to the front door, she carefully opened it. There was one tiny little path. It was like this little L path that went from the front door to the couch. You could walk that path, but everything else truly was cluttered. In her case, she had gone through a depression for about 7 years, and during that time, all she could do was work, but she couldn't deal with anything in her home. Everything piled up. So we were able to, over time, clear that. In the other case, I go to the client's house. I walk in, and again, he was saying, I have so much clutter, I can't think. I walk in, we sit down in the living room. I wasn't seeing any clutter. And, he's in distress telling me how much clutter there is. So I finally said to him, I said, can you point to the clutter? Because again, it's not what I perceive clutter as, it's what the person perceives it as. And we all have different sense of how much clutter, what is clutter. So he points to this pile of books on the side table, and that was really bothering him. Thinking, okay, this is interesting. And then we talked a little more, and then he said, well, really, the worst clutter is upstairs. And I thought, this is it. He just needs a little time to get to know you, because, you have to build trust, right? People are bringing you into their homes. They're showing you the things that they feel most upset about. So we go, he said, the worst of it is in my bedroom, on my desk, and my closet. So we go up there, and I shouldn't smile. On his desk, I shouldn't, because it's not right. There were 3 pieces of paper, and in his closet, he had about 10 shirts. And this was just putting him over the top. And so as we talked, what I learned from him was that he had trouble making decisions. And anything that was out represented a decision. And it just, so this was really early on. I've been doing this over 30 years. And this was early in my career. And that's when I learned that clutter is subjective. And it's really, how does it make you feel? And, very often you see within a household, there may be people here that are just living on their own. There may be people with multiple people in their household. Everyone has a different feeling about clutter. Someone in the household, it may not bother them at all. They may not even see it. Someone else in the household, it's an issue. So as the organizer, I'm always trying to figure out how is the client seeing it, what's their stress point, and how can we fix that. So the reason why I shared this quote was because it really is a huge spectrum of what clutter is and how it makes you feel. And so we're going to talk a little more about that. So I'm going to give you a little brief background about how I got started. We'll talk about where clutter comes from, why it's so hard to let go. I had a couple of conversations earlier today, and that came up in conversation. And then some strategies for what we can do about it. This is just like a few ideas in each of these categories, because in any one of these we could go into a very long discussion, but we don't have time for that. So what I'm hoping is that you showed up tonight and that you leave with something that's helpful, whether that's helpful for yourself personally or someone in your life that's struggling, and that's what my goal is. You might have your own goal for tonight. So let's see, 30-something years ago, I had 2 little babies. I was working in the computer graphics industry. As Denise said, I came from a fine arts background, got into graphic design, then computer graphics. And I always worked hard. I was a great employee. But I thought, I would like to build something that I'm going to take that effort and do it for our family on my terms rather than working for someone else. And so I thought, well, I'd like to start a business. And I'd done other entrepreneurial things growing up, but there were a couple conditions about it. One, it couldn't be capital intensive because we didn't have a lot of money to start a business. I'd already had a lot of education, and I didn't want to go back to train to do something. And so I thought, well, what are the skills that I have, and what am I seeing out there that there's a need? And so I started to think that, first of all, I loved working with people, and so I wanted it to be a service-oriented business. I was noticing that other parents with young kids were really struggling with the organizing piece in their life. And I thought, I've always been organized. In the organizing industry, there are 2 camps. There's organizers that come to the industry because they were born organized, and you've heard that term, and there are organizers that come to the industry because they themselves have struggled and they've learned strategies and they're now helping others. So I was in the born organized camp, but I realized it was a teachable skill. So, and I felt like I could really help other parents with kids that were struggling. And I didn't know there was an industry at the time, because the industry is probably about 40 years or so old. So I got into it in the early days, but there weren't a lot of us then. And so eventually I found an association and joined all those, and I've had a lot of involvement with those associations over the years. But I thought, okay, I will, start this business. So I literally started with a letter. I sent out 100 letters, good old snail mail. There was no, I don't think there was email 30 years, right? No email. And I sent, to family and friends, and I said, hey, I'm starting this business. If you know anyone, these are the kinds of things I could help with. And from that, I got my first 3 clients, and it started to build from there. I was still working for, in the graphics industry, but there was a point, maybe about 6 months in, where I had to make a choice. And so I left the job and started to do this full time. And then it expanded. It wasn't just parents with young kids, but I've worked with people, ages 5 to 90 plus. So it's all ages and stages of life. I have a specialty in working with clients that are chronically disorganized, and those are individuals that really struggle with the organizing piece in their life. There's this past history, there's sort of a future expectation that there'll be disorganization, and it has a negative effect on the daily quality of life. In 2020, does that year sound familiar to anyone? We know what happened in 2020. So when the pandemic hit, my business went from here to 0 overnight because I could no longer go in and see clients. And so I very quickly tried to figure out how can I still help my clients, and so I started working virtually, which is something I never wanted to do. Well, it turned out I love doing it. And so then I got certified in doing that, and that's all that I do now. I don't work in person anymore. I have a history of doing that, but now I just work Zoom, FaceTime, even the phone. So where does clutter come from? I love this quote. Clutter Anonymous says, clutter is anything we don't need, want, or use that takes our time, energy, or space, and destroys our serenity. So clutter comes from all kinds of places, and I've just selected a few places. Some of these may sound familiar. You may think of other places that that clutter comes from in your life. But one of the places that clutter comes from is because we have no designated home for our things. So, stuff comes into the house in a variety of ways. We bring it in, family members bring it in, it arrives in packages and bags, and sometimes it just lands and it stays put. And that may be okay if it's one bag or one box, but over time, if that's a pattern, that's one place that clutter can accumulate. So we don't take the time to route the thing that came in to a home. So that's one place. The other thing that happens is, we live this life, and life has stuff, right? We have all this physical stuff that we collect over time. So we collect and we collect, but we forget to do the other piece, which is to edit. And we just, once it lands, we decide, okay, now it's ours to keep, and we don't let it go. So again, if we're just collecting and never letting go, I see a smile, this is resonating, then that can become clutter. So one of the questions I like to ask, and there's a zillion editing questions you can ask, but one of my favorites is, has it overstayed its welcome? Right? Because maybe that thing was useful at a time, but now it no longer fits. It's no longer part of the lifestyle that we have. Someone gave it to me and I just never really liked it. So there are lots of reasons, but if we don't take the time to ask the questions, guess what? Stuff's just gonna stay, and that can become clutter. You don't have to raise your hand, but there might be some procrastinators in the room. That's a common thing. And with procrastination, the way that ties to clutter is because we kind of have this idea of, I'm not going to deal with it now. I'm going to deal with it later, some other time. And so when we postpone the decisions about the stuff in our life, again, it can accumulate. Does this sound familiar? I might need it someday. Yeah, okay. Yes, that's a phrase I hear very often. And the reality is, the thing that's in question, you might need it someday, but you might not. And there's other questions you can ask, like, how long has it been in my life? Has it been a year that I haven't needed it? 2 years? A decade? 3 decades? And so you can start to tease it out to say, well, if I haven't used this thing in 20 years, it's unlikely I'm going to need it. And again, it depends. I'm not making like a blank statement because it depends on what the thing is that's in question. But again, if you find yourself saying that frequently, it could be a source of where the clutter's coming from. And then lastly, and again, these are just a few ideas of where clutter comes from. There's like many other places, but we're just trying to hone it in here. So the other thing is that, we live in a society that's encouraging us to buy more, to buy new, to get things. And those messages are coming, and like, is anyone here on social media, Instagram, Facebook? Do you get whatever you're looking at, you're getting ads all the time, right? So you're being encouraged and pinged and dinged to buy these things. And then there's the magazines, and there's TV, and all these places. And so without really putting some boundaries around your own purchasing habits, you can find yourself ending up with more than you need. And so that's another huge source. And in fact, one of my colleagues, she's a therapist, and actually she's passed away now, but her specialty was in shopping addiction. And she used to tell me, Dr. April Lane Benson was her name, and she would tell me that shopping addiction was harder to overcome than even alcoholism. And that's because how pervasive shopping is in our society. So the next one is for you. So I'm going to ask the question, and if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but maybe someone is willing to share what they feel their number one source of clutter is. Is anyone willing to?
Paper.
Paper, okay. Yeah? Paper's a big one. Yeah, so do you want to tell me anything about the paper, or you just want to say paper?
I would say that it's some of the stuff I need, some of the stuff I don't, and I just don't have the time to go through it, so it keeps piling up. But what happens is if I'm looking for something that's in that pile of multiple piles of paper, I spend so much time looking for that one piece that it's very time consuming. It takes a long time.
Yeah, so paper accumulation is probably a really common thing that I see. And, some of there are lots of ways around it, but some of the things you can do is do what I would call triage. So when it comes in, you route it to different areas like the recycling, the trash, and then maybe some action items. I mean, you can get more complicated, but on the simplest level, if you try to address it when it comes in, even if you can't handle the actual action items, but you at least,
Yeah, I think the action
pile gets really big.
Yeah, I get it. I know the recycling, it's the action pile.
Yeah, I get that. It's true. And so, that then goes into, time management and just, and I think also what happens is sometimes it always seems like it's way worse than it is, but when you allow yourself 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there to deal with it, you can, work on it. Yeah.
But as part of that is, do I really need this?
The paper.
The paper, I'm thinking I've got so many explanation of benefits for me and my kids.
Oh, yeah.
Do I really need that?
Yes.
And I do, right.
Yeah.
But so how do I then
decide
what I need and where to put it?
Yeah. Right. So again, that's a great, so what you're bringing up is that whole decision tree process. And remember one of the clients I explained at the beginning, that was the hardest part for him, was that just making any decision. So when you're going through, let's just say in the case of papers, one of the things you can do is make, and I'll talk about this a little later, but you can make sort of these global parameters so that you may say, well, I only need the explanation of benefits for this year, and maybe you don't need them at all because you can get them online, but let's just say you only need them for this year. So then if there's anything older than that, assuming it's all taken care of, maybe that can just go. So when you see the date, you don't have to decide each time, and you're just like expediting it, but that's just one idea.
Yeah.
So,
How many people have a file cabinet?
yes, well, that's an interesting thing. So of a certain generation, a lot of us have file cabinets.
Or if you have your own business, you have one. But if
Right, but like the younger, not so much. They're doing everything digitally, so it's interesting. But yeah, I have file cabinets.
Because if you don't have one, you get things that you need to keep. Where do you put them?
Oh, if you don't have one?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a file cabinet for things that you want to keep, you could digitize them.
Yes.
I mean, I don't.
I mean, I do.
Yeah, but that you could.
I like the accordion files.
Yep, there's a zillion ways to do it. You know, some people still like the physical aspect of stuff. You know, like I don't know if we have readers here, but I still like to read books. I like to hold the book, I like to highlight the book, I like the book. But plenty of people I know, they like the e-readers because there's no book clutter. But for me, I don't want to be on a screen. So it's, you know, you have to figure out what your preferences are, and then there's lots of ways to deal with it. So, the next question, why is it so hard to let go? And I think, you know, we've heard a little about this. And so, Kingma said, holding on is believing that there's only a past. Letting go is knowing that there's a future. So, one of the reasons why I think sometimes people have trouble letting go, and I think when we were talking about paper, for instance, I'm not sure this one really applies, but it could apply to other things, which is that the stuff that we own, we feel attached to them, and in some way these things define who we are. It may represent who we were like from childhood or who we were in another career, and so sometimes when we let these go, we feel like we're losing a part of who we are. And so that can be an obstacle in letting go. It also could be because we've inherited the things from someone that we really love, you know, and that is no longer here. And so we keep the physical belongings as a way of remembering them. And so that can sometimes be an obstacle in letting go. There's also can be guilt around letting go. So has anyone ever received a gift from anyone that was given to them with love, but they just don't like it? They don't need it, they don't want it, but they feel guilty. Oh, I saw a couple of hands, yeah. Okay.
And I'm letting go.
Yeah. I remember one of the things my mother-in-law used to do, which was, I was always impressed by this, but she would remember who gave her what, and then when they'd come over, she'd put it out. You know? I was like, okay. But my feeling about it, and again, it's all personal, you have to figure out for yourself what works and what doesn't, is that if someone has gifted you something, you are now the owner of it, which means you have decision rights. If it doesn't fit in your life, if you don't want it, if you don't need it, you have the right to let it move on.
I like that.
Yeah. So you have my permission to use that. Perfectionism. I don't know if we have any. We have a few hands going up. Okay.
Environmentally, in every level.
Yes.
Like, how do I dispose of something?
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
perfectionism can often cause paralysis in letting go, and exactly that. So often I encounter clients that want to let something go. They're willing to let it go, but they have to let it go what they would call the right way. So disposing of it responsibly or to the exact right place that they're going to donate it to. And I respect that, but at the point where you want to let go and you're overwhelmed by all the stuff, but you can't do it because you're not able to, you know, like the letting go part, you've put so many obstacles to make that happen. So that can really be a challenge for letting go at times. And there's not really a quick fix for that. It's more of a perspective shift over time, and that's, you know, something that just requires patience and a lot of conversations about. And maybe there's movement there, or maybe not. Probably the number one reason why people call is because they're overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed by the clutter. And again, it may not be that kind of clutter I described from that one client where truly there was stuff everywhere. It's how the clutter feels for them, feels overwhelming. And so they're so overwhelmed, they can't figure out how to get started, where to get started, or what to do. And so even with letting go, you know, they just don't even know what room to start in or what area or what category to start in. And then the other one that happens, it has to do with emotional attachments. So this is where we have lots of stuff in our life, and maybe some things we don't feel particularly attached to, like maybe we have 5 spatulas in the kitchen, and we might like one more than the others, we can get rid of the others, we don't feel particularly attached. But maybe we have a sweater or an article of clothing that belonged to someone that we love that's no longer here, and it doesn't really fit us, but we just feel a pull to it. Or it could be mementos we've collected from our travels, and we don't really need them, and they're collecting dust, but yet we have an attachment. So that can be an obstacle in letting go. I no longer work in person, but when I did, one of the techniques that I would use was related to what's called kinesthetic sympathy. And the way this works is that when if I were to hand, let's say, you an object, do you feel like now this is your water bottle? Yeah. So what happens is when you touch something, you feel more attached to it. I'll make it all that. It's just an illustration. So if I see that a client's having trouble making decisions, let's say on a pile of clothing we're going through, I'll ask if it's okay if I hold up the things as they decide. So they're no longer touching it as they're deciding. And that often makes it much easier to decide. Because once they touch it, now it's theirs. It's So that's something to keep in mind. Again, when I'm working virtually with someone, I don't have the ability to do that, but because they are the touchers of it, they're the movers and shakers. But if find that this is something that you're struggling with, you could partner with someone to work with you in this way. So again, I'm going to open up the question. Does anyone want to share a letting go challenge that they have? Okay.
I have 4 kids, and I think I have everything they've made from kindergarten.
Ditto. We got ditto.
And they are 20 to 27 years old.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
But I pulled it out of the attic and I go, okay, just let's go through it and we'll get rid of it. And my son's like, we can't get rid of this. We can't get rid of this. So now it's back in the box and under the bed.
So you were ready to let it go.
I was ready to
but
let
your
it go,
son
but
was not.
now they're not. And he
All
wants
the
to wait
kids
for
are
his
not?
sister to get home from college so that she can go through it. And
So are all the kids that way or just one?
just one. I think
Okay.
the other 2 probably couldn't care less.
Okay, so that's good to know. It means that 2 of the 4 are willing to let go, and maybe you work with them on that. And sometimes that will then inspire the others. So I was working with a client yesterday. She's in California, and she told me that in between sessions, she happened to mention to one of her friends that we were working together. And then a few days later, the friend said to her, you know what, I started going through my closet and getting rid of stuff. And I've learned that once you start the work, you start to, and you talk about it, or someone's seeing you do it, it kind of starts to inspire those around you. So that could work, possibly. 2 of the kids are willing, and that might encourage your son to let go too. Yeah.
But, But then there's the issue, here I go, I'm creating clutter. I have grown-up children, now they have their own houses.
Okay.
And they go through phases, so they can finish college and then they decide to just get rid of everything. And then 5 years later, 7 years later, they start going like, oh, where is that? Where is that? They've already disposed of it,
Yeah.
and they wish they had not.
Okay.
And then the things that, I was able to kind of store and put in my basement or whatever, now their children are enjoying it. Now they themselves are going like, wow, this is true. This is what I did in first grade. This is what I did in second grade. So there is a little bit of a trick on this side, because you want to get rid of stuff that is not good, not used. You haven't seen it in 10 years. You haven't seen it in 15 years. But can I tell you, there's value to it, and we know it as grown-ups, that there's value for it later on. And if you do have where to put it away, sometimes it's nice not to throw away.
So I think that's such a valuable point, because I hope I'm not getting across the message, and this is really important to say. I don't believe in getting rid of stuff for the sake of getting rid of it. That is totally not what this is about. It's about finding what is meaningful for you in your life And that could be keeping mementos. It could be keeping lots of clothes. It's whatever it is, and that's fine. It's the stuff that's in the way. Because it's the extra stuff that, you know, like when you said you kept all the kids, and I'm just using you as an example if you don't mind. But I understand what keeping all the kids' stuff means. It means all the creative projects they've done and all the worksheets and all the math sheets and all that.
Well, not.
Okay, not I'm just pretending, because I've seen that. But it's teasing out. It's like, what's the treasure versus what isn't. And again, I'm a sentimental person. My husband will attest to that. So I definitely love to keep things. And we have lots of stuff in our house. We are not minimalist by any means. But the things have meaning. And there are areas that do need to be looked at. But again, is the extra stuff preventing you from living the life you want? Or do you have the space for it and you have the storage for it and it doesn't matter? So I'm really only talking about when it's an issue. And again, you absolutely want to keep the treasures, whatever those treasures are, you know. And yes, but part of what you say also relates to might need it someday. And so there can be like, if you let go of something, am I going to regret doing it? And again, that's not a quick answer, but I think when someone is really struggling, I will not encourage them to let go until they've made peace with what the objective is. So, anyone else want to share a letting go challenge?
Well,
Go ahead, Julie.
I mean, I only have one son, and I do have the boxes still from grade school, and I'm going to selectively call, and I'm going to wait until I find the second grade 50 math operation worksheet that my son jabbed with a pencil about 60 times saying, I already know this. And like, I want to frame that one.
Yeah.
You know, like that one had meaning,
Okay.
you know, and then there are others I can get rid of. And for him, it's like, he doesn't, you know, but for me, I vividly remember
Yeah.
the homework struggle.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, so that's, what is it about those moments too?
Yeah.
You know, and to kind of be selective, but that's gonna take time.
It does
You
take
know, I
time.
know it's gonna take time.
Yeah.
To do it little by little, yeah.
Exactly. I don't think any organizing should be done in some marathon way unless for some reason, and there are cases where it has to be that way. But if possible, I like to help my clients to integrate that piece into their life, like in a way that's doable, that isn't stressful, that is possible with all the other things that are going on. Because, you know, it's rare that a person decides getting organized is the only priority in their life and nothing else matters. You know, that's just not realistic.
I just
Yes.
wanted to add something about
Sure.
all the clutter from children and
Yeah.
everything. Well, when they're in school, they get trophies and everything like that, and when they bring it home, you're like you're in awe, you love it.
course.
It's like the greatest thing that happened. But when they grow older and they go on their own, you should be able to feel comfortable in saying, these are yours. So when you take them out, they should be out of my way.
Yes.
And you tell your children,
Yeah.
these are the trophies I won when I was in school. And then they pass it. So for adults, they get older and they want to sell. When you really see this when you sell a house.
Yeah.
Then you go in there and say, wow, what am I doing with all of this?
Right.
Most of this is my kids.
Yeah.
And they're married on their own. Well, come and get it. And they take it.
Right. So again, I think part of that is, you know, I think we're all of a certain age and maybe we have kids, maybe we don't, but when you come across the kid stuff, it's worth having the conversation with your kids because you may be surprised. They may want it or they may
Right.
say, you know, recycle it, donate it, whatever. So I think that's an important thing to do. Also, by the way, there is a place that you can recycle trophies. I have that somewhere. If you want to I don't know off the top, but if you take my card and email me, I can get you that information. Yes.
The breakdown comes when the parent says to the kid, okay, come get your stuff, and by this deadline on Monday, whatever it is, and the kid says, I don't have any place for it, I'm living in the city apartment, whatever. And then the parent says, oh geez, I can't quite.
That's a good point.
So, you know, again.
6 mini
yeah.
storages later,
Yeah. It's true. I mean,
That's
there's
a good point.
so some of what you're also talking about are boundary issues, and it's like, you know, and I've had these, you know, we've got adult kids too, so I understand, you know, when the kids come, do you want to have them, you know, you want to spend the time with them, do you want to make them go through their stuff? Not usually, you want to do something else, but there are other ways you can take, you know, you don't have to do it all at once, but you can take photos and text them and say, do you want this or not, and then, you know, whatever.
It's work.
So there are lots of ways. Some parents are willing to store the kids' stuff, and others, because they're moving, they can't. So they're, you know, it depends on the family situation. But usually a conversation about it helps a lot. Did someone else have one other thing? Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Clothing.
Say it again?
Clothing.
Clothing,
I
okay.
have closets and drawers full of clothes, and I wear the same 3 things.
Yes. Gotcha. That's a good clue. I'm going to get to that one. So. Okay, so what can we do about clutter? We've talked about it a little bit, but I love this quote from Eileen Fisher because she says, in the midst of the problem is the next possibility. And that's kind of where I live. You know, clients come to me with all kinds of challenges, and that's the fun part, is trying, I mean, it may not be fun for them, but it's fun for me to try to figure out how can we make this better. So, are we doing okay on time? Yeah? Am I going over too much? Or, I'm almost done. Okay. You're okay?
We're okay?
You all okay? I'll talk fast.
You know you're a
Everybody loves what you said.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So the first thing about clutter is, and I think this is important to be said, is it a challenge or not? So you're all here, and you may be here for different reasons, but if in your life the clutter isn't a challenge, then, you know, there's nothing to really worry about or think about it. But there are some things to think about where it could be an issue. So one are life transitions. So when we go through life transitions, things like having a baby, getting divorced, moving, downsizing, upsizing, losing a job, getting a new job, moving. Sometimes the things that we had in the life that we're changing from just don't fit anymore. And so that's often a great time to think about what we have in our life and, you know, do these things fit anymore? Also, is clutter a hazard? It could be a safety hazard, a fire hazard. And so that's, again, if there's that kind of thing going on, good to think about. I mentioned before about how clients often will hire me when they're feeling stuck and overwhelmed. And so when I say that, what is happening for them is that the clutter has become an obstacle in their life to the degree where they are not really living the life they want. They're not having friends over, they're not socializing, they're not spending time with family because they're consumed by the weight of the clutter. And again, it may not be, when I say clutter, again, it may not be just physical clutter, it manifests in all kinds of ways. And then there's the idea of ownership, and we sort of touched on this a little bit, and the responsibility for our stuff. So, you know, from the conversation, I can tell that many of you have kids, and as we age and as they age, at some point we're not going to be here. And so if we haven't dealt with the stuff in our life, in essence, we're leaving that for our kids to do. And I know both my parents are gone now, as are my husband, my in-laws too. And when my folks were finally gone, the house that they lived in, they'd been there for almost 60 years. And as much as, you know, they would sometimes edit stuff, a house full of 60 years, and Denise knows what I'm talking about, I'm sorry, I know this is a day for you. That's a lot of stuff to go through. So even though I'm sure my mom and dad didn't want to leave it for me and my siblings to have to deal with, guess what we did? And so I know for myself, I don't want to live in a house with nothing in it, but I certainly want to have it be only with the things that we really love and enjoy, and so that when we go and our kids have to clear out, they aren't going through all the stuff that was the extra. So it's worth thinking about that. I'm not trying to be morbid, I'm just trying to be realistic, you know, that you know, the stuff that we brought into our lives is our stuff, and we have the opportunity to take responsibility for it, or if we don't, we're leaving it for our loved ones to deal with. So some clutter solutions. I'm going to give this one for you because you said about the clothing. So the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, which is that we only use 20% of the things that we own, and the other 80% is just, hanging out, taking up space. So it's very common, and I think if you're not alone with the clothing thing, that if you think about the clothes you wear, you probably have your favorites. You like the color, you like the way it feels, they fit right, and the other stuff is just hanging there. So it's not that you have to get rid of the other 80%, but when you're editing, it's worth thinking about that. Okay, I have 20 pairs of black pants. I do laundry twice a week. How many black pants do I need? Or, you can put some parameters around that. The other thing is, earlier I talked about clutter happens because we don't create homes for things. So the thing is, before you give something a home, ask the question, is it home worthy? So it may not deserve a home, okay? It may be ripe for exiting. The other piece is completing the cycle, and this is where some mindfulness comes in. So think about when you're, doing anything. Let's just use groceries as an example. You go grocery shopping, you come into the house with all the bags of stuff, and now they just sit. But you're not really done grocery shopping. Yes, you've procured the items, but you've got to put them in the pantry or the refrigerator, and then what happens with the bags? Do they just sit there? They go back in your car? Do they have a space? So all the things that you're doing with stuff that you're handling, think about the cycle of it, like laundry. Laundry is usually a big one for people, I don't know, it's just like, I happen to like doing laundry, but a lot of people hate doing laundry, and it becomes this whole thing. Yeah, we have some laundry haters here. But, the clothes are dirty, right? So they go into maybe a hamper, or maybe they never make it to a hamper, maybe it's the floor. And then eventually they get to the washing machine, and they have to be transferred to the dryer, and then they've got to be folded and put away, or not. But it's a cycle, and so if any part of a cycle breaks down, then that's where clutter can happen. So when you're doing a process, just think about, have you completed it, and that can help. The other thing, and I touched on this a little bit, was about establishing boundaries for things. So that can really help when you have a lot of decision making to make. And has anyone ever heard of decision fatigue? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a real thing, and it's when you're making so many decisions, and each of you makes like thousands of decisions a day. You get so tired by making decisions that the quality of your decisions goes down the toilet. So one of the things I always pay attention to when I'm working with clients and we're doing editing, because we do lots of things, but one of the things we do together is edit, is if they start changing their response to something, it's probably time for a break, because they're just tired. And it's hard to decide a lot of things. So if you establish boundaries for some of that decision making, it can help with some of the decision fatigue. So for instance, you set up parameters. It could be a time parameter, like I'm only going to work on this for 15 minutes. Or it could be a physical parameter, like, I don't know, do we have anyone here that gets magazines and has lots of magazines? I see it. Okay, a couple of heads shaking. Okay. So magazines could be a source of clutter and stuff. So maybe you have a bin, and when the bin is full, that's the time to edit. That's a kind of a boundary. Or maybe you say, I'm only going to keep the last 3 months of magazines, and everything older than that goes. But again, it helps with some of the decision making. Another thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is just about organizing in shorter time segments. So don't think you have to spend hours at a time doing something. You can do something in 15 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes. You can set a time. I think I went over time, but I like the timer. I didn't do so well with my time. I love this timer. This is a visual timer, so it shows elapsed time.
That's cool.
There is
I like that.
Yeah, this is great. They have different sizes, and they have digital ones in this too, but I really like this product. And then the other tip I'll give you is just, if you're really struggling with the organizing piece, you're struggling with how are you going to do this, making decisions, how do I even organize what's left? Enlist help. You don't have to go this alone. In other words, everyone here is expert in something, and that's wonderful. but there are things that we struggle with, and that's when it's worth reaching out for help. So whether it's a friend, family member, professional organizer like me, someone that you trust, that's non-judgmental, that can help you, I would highly recommend doing that rather than continuing to struggle on your own. So again, I hope that you have thought of something for yourself that's useful, that you can help with reducing clutter. We talked about where it comes from. You all had some other ideas of where your clutter comes from, why it's hard to let go, and just some ideas about clutter. Aside from doing workshops and working one-on-one, I also am a blogger, writer, and so I have cards and stuff you can pick up, and on my website there are tons of articles about a lot of this stuff and way more if you want to know more. So start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. You can reach me by email, by phone, website. I'm on social media. I didn't put any of my social media things here, but I'm on all the different various assorted platforms. And what I'd love to do now is do the giveaways, and then if there are any more questions. Okay. All right. Who has the? Oh, we got this. Okay. Oh, these are the one-liners. Okay. The cards. Okay. Let's. How about we do this? If you want to put the cards in, or cards.
Oh, it fell down. Oh.
So here's some pencils.
Okay.
These are the blanks.
Okay. Great. Up.
Yeah, how many pictures?
Thank you.
Am I gonna need?
Yes.
Start somewhere.
He's gonna go home.
That's-
I do that every day.
Okay, do a drum roll. We need a drum roll. Ready? Ready? And the winner is Tony Balone?
Of course, that's my email address, but
You changed your name.
but actually,
you
where
don't want
I
it?
put my name in, it says thank you, but I want fewer things.
Okay.
And I always win, so I
We have to sit next to you, Tony. Pick another. Okay. That's so. I love that. I know. I debated. Should I give him stuff? This is useful stuff. But you can throw it out if you don't want. Elizabeth Ward. Oh, there's two more. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, she comes with good stuff. We come with. Yeah, she comes with gift stuff. I know. Okay. Lynn Harmony. Thank you. Okay. One more. Put this on the side. This is my notebook. Oh, did I tell you she's an author? So she's giving away her book. This is awesome. And also, we didn't mention that she belongs to an organization, and the Japan organization asked her to speak a couple of years ago. So she knows what I was doing.
It shows that you are good at what you do.
That's right.
I love that. So now for the grand prize. Grand prize. Vinny!
Oh,
Right. Everybody, a big round of applause. Thank you so much for we really learned a lot here. You're awesome. And of course, she's got her cards and everything, so make sure to take a postcard and a card, sign up for her newsletter. If we don't have your information, some of you, I know a lot of you, but we want to see you again. We have a monthly email that comes out, and we have a save the date. We're booked, I think, until I'm waiting for September to tell me if she's free. So, yeah, September. So, we want you to come back. So let's stay in touch. So there's a book there. Please give me a legible email. We'll stay in touch with you. We won't bother you. And, we always have good snacks. So thank you again. Good job. All right, everybody at home watching on Instagram, thank you so much for coming. Wait, everybody's going to say goodbye to you. Wait, hold on. These are Instagram people. Wait a minute. Ready? When it comes around, say hello. Goodbye. See, we have a lot of people. We've got people all over the country who tune in. Sure. Was that fun? Okay, we've got to go. We have some more things. I need a glass of wine. I'll talk to you later.